Hello everyone and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Lyndall Stout. We begin today with an update on winter crops, and now that spring is here, a little advice on planning ahead for summer production. Here's SUNUP's Dave Deacon and our Extension Cropping System Specialist, Josh Lofton.
Well, we're in a great spot. This has been almost a 180 where we were this time last year. We look fantastic. We do have, we're kind of getting out of those cold conditions. I know this weekend we're going to get into a little bit cooler, but we see that more of that warming trend. So we look to be coming out of the base of the winter. And the good thing is we got great soil moisture. The crop looks great. It's set up really well to finish out this year really strong.
That's the winter crops. Summer crops are on the minds of many producers across the state. What are some of the options for those folks looking at putting in a summer crop?
Well, I mean, we have pretty much all of our summer crops going to be accounted for probably in most parts of the state. You know, we're looking really strong. Currently we have corn going in, and then right on the doorstep we have some of our other summer crops like our sorghums and our soybeans. Cotton's a little farther away, but we do have a lot of those summer crops kind of sitting right there on that doorstep as soon as we get corn in.
After corn, what else in a timeline? What would be some of the planting options after that?
Well, that's all going to depend on our soil temperatures.
Right.
You know, that's going to really highly vary. Corn is usually our first one planted because it can take cooler soil temperatures, which is why we like to get it in a lot earlier. Kind of why we talked about how they were right there on the doorstep is looking out on the Mesonet site, and I highly encourage growers when they're starting to look at I want to get this crop in, or I want to get another crop in, that you go to that Mesonet site, look at those 3-day average 2-inch soil temperatures. That's going to really be a good base for them. But growers can pick up a thermometer, or a garden thermometer, or soil thermometer at any of their local garden or co-ops. And basic things, what you want to do is just kind of go in where you're wanting to plant in very similar conditions. Once again, we're wanting to get around that 2-inch soil temperature and just kind of stick it in. Yeah. Let it kind of calibrate, let it get that temperature for a little bit, and then we can actually get the exact temperature of the conditions in the field that we're wanting to go in. And we see the difference. We just checked Mesonet, and they were at 2-inch soil temperatures. Currently, right now, we're in between 53 and 55. This one before we started was around 58 to 60. So it does vary from Mesonet. Mesonet's a great place to get started, but I really highly suggest growers go out and get a thermometer that they can actually put into the field in those conditions that they're going to be planting in to kind of make those decisions.
Moving from summer crops back just briefly to one of the winter crops, canola. You're going to be out across the state showing off the statewide canola crop. Yeah,
and it looks fantastic. Kind of like what we said, it's probably one of the better looking canola crops we've had in the last several years. And we're going to be out on the western side of the state at the Lahoma Research Station, and then up in a producer's field in Grant County on the 23rd of April. 25th of April, we're going to be over on the eastern side of the state up in Ottawa County, just north of Miami, looking at the canola up there. And we do have a flyer available. It's one of those things that growers can just kind of show up to. Come see the crop. We'll discuss a little bit about management practices, what we need to do from here on, and then kind of get a good look of how the varieties are performing in these great conditions that we've had.
Okay, thank you very much, Josh Lofton. And for more information about the canola tours and your very own meat thermometer, go to our website, sunup.okstate.edu.
Hi, Wes Lee back with your weekly Mesonet weather report. What a beautiful week of spring weather we have experienced this past week. Temperatures were mild, winds manageable, and no severe weather. Driving across the state recently, it appears that crops are still a little behind schedule. One of the reasons for this may be those continuing cool soil temperatures. This map from earlier this week shows 4-inch soil temperatures under sod were running mainly in the 50s in the southern half of the state and in the 40s in the northern half. If we compare the same map 1 year ago, we see 60s in the south and high 50s in the north. This means between a 5 to 10 degree difference between 2017 and 2018. In fact, soil temperatures have been below normal now for the past 6 weeks. In this chart, the blue indicates the average 4-inch soil temperature over the past 15 years for the entire state. The red line is the smooth soil temperatures observed in the months of February and March. Temperatures fell below normal around the 10th of February and have yet to fully recover. Another stretch of warm temperatures like last week should move us back to normal. However, forecast temperatures for next week appear to be tending towards cooler than normal. Gary is up next to talk about weather and wildfires.
Thanks, Wes, and good morning, everyone. Well, as usual, we're going to start with the newest drought monitor map. Not many changes, but there are some subtle differences. And then we're going to take a look at the differences between this time this year and this time last year, and what a difference a year makes. So we remain with just one problem area in the state, that's far southwestern Oklahoma. No drought in the state. We got rid of that with the rains over the last few weeks. Now let's take a look at the relative greenness maps. These are satellite maps obtained from the Mesonet's OK Fire prescribed burning program. We can see some pretty distinct differences between the relative greenness from this time last year versus this time this year, especially out across western Oklahoma. Now the culprit in the differences in those greenness maps, of course, would be the rainfall we received over a certain time frame over the last 2 years. So if we look at the water year rainfall, at least the rainfall departure maps from the Mesonet, we can see deficits across western Oklahoma from October 1st through March 25th last year, 4, 5, 6 inches, even as much as 12 inches in some areas. Therein lies the differences in the relative greenness maps. We've just received so much more rainfall this time this year versus this time last year over the previous 5 or 6 months. Now if you take a look at this last week's map, we can see almost no color in the map at all, of course, just like the newest map that we looked at earlier. So, we start with the greenness, a vast difference there. We attribute that to the differences in rainfall, and of course that was reflected in the difference in the U.S. drought monitor maps between the two time periods. So I guess the final message is we're not perfect across the state. Some people have had too much rainfall, some have had too little. But we're in pretty good shape, especially as you compare it to last year. So that's something to be thankful for. That's it for this time. We'll see you next time on the Mesonet Weather Report.
Southeastern Oklahoma is known for its beautiful lakes and pine forests, but it is also home to many cattle operations. And now OSU scientists are there studying ways to improve grazing. Today, SUNUP's Curtis Hare takes us to Pushmataha County to learn more.
So we're down here burning some research and demonstration plats that we've been maintaining for over 30 years at Pushmataha Wildlife Management Area. So we're doing research on different vegetation management practices. Some of the plats are burnt annually, some are burnt every 2, 3, or 4 years. And so we're trying to see how that affects the understory vegetation and the pine trees as well. The understory vegetation, most of it is the herbaceous vegetation, most of it's grass, and that's forage for cows. And so we're really interested in what happens to our forage production when we do these different practices.
You wouldn't think an area like this with massive rocky hills full of pine trees would be great for grazing. But if managed correctly with tools such as fire, it can be a great forage option for producers in this part of the state.
Yeah, so these are actually excellent areas to graze cows. This is a 50-inch rainfall zone, so they get 50 inches of annual rainfall. So they have the potential to grow a lot of forage.
Although the land can be great for grazing, Extension Southeast District Area Livestock Specialist Brian Frecking says with the absence of fire and other management practices, running cattle in this area is challenging.
It is a lot of mountainous on the eastern side of the state, and so to run a cow in that kind of territory, it takes a lot more acres. What you see behind me, there's not a lot of grass within the trees, and so those cattle do have to go quite a ways to find something to eat.
So the first thing is that fire helps to suppress our woody vegetation, and so Across Oklahoma, we have issues with woody plants growing in areas that were historically grasslands. Part of grazing cattle is maintaining grasses. And so if we don't burn, this area will turn into an area that's mostly wooded.
You'll see, like in a patch burning situation, where cattle will be right where the spot where it's burned, but in the other parts where it's been 3 years for it's burned, they don't really touch it, and so they stay away from those areas. Things like burning also helps things like ticks, decreases the number of ticks that are the animals are exposed to, horn flies. Those are all environmentally related to fire as well as a tool.
Cattle distribution, especially in areas like this that have some kind of steep terrain, and generally you have issues with water distribution because of that terrain. So you have water at low points, steep slopes. This is rocky, so it can kind of be harder for cows to get around to a degree. Using burning can really help to increase their use of areas that are far away from water.
Prescribed fire also helps in another important part of cattle production in this area, finding your cows.
So the environment that cattle producers have to deal with in the southeast is obviously the open spaces is a lot different, and so they may even have to use things like dogs to go in and round those cattle up, even on horseback to get them out of some of these thick brushes areas, and so that is kind of one of the challenges for southeast Oklahoma as a cattle producer, just finding your cattle.
And this is actually what a lot of our rangelands in the mountains out west look like. You know, they just have different grasses and different pine trees. This doesn't only impact cattle, it impacts lots of our wildlife species. So when we have a really close canopy forest, we have very few legumes, forbs, broadleaf plants that grow in the understory, and those are important forage species for white-tailed deer, for turkey, for bobwhite quail. So we have to have that balance of enough sunlight getting to the vegetation below that they can grow as well.
So John, normally when we're with you talking about burning, it's more burning rangeland pastures, but these forested areas need burning too.
That's right. And again, fire is a big integral part of the ecology and the natural processes that go on in these forests and stuff throughout Oklahoma and throughout all of the U.S.
Why is it important, ecologically speaking, to burn the forest floor?
So again, it's important for the plants and the wildlife that live here. That's a big part of it. But also, again, there's a lot of these trees and stuff that are adapted to fire. You know, they're part of it. Shortleaf pine, which is native to southeast Oklahoma, that we burn in and burn through. It's a fire adapted species, and fire is important for a lot of its life cycle and going on with it. And there are certain species of trees and plants that fire has to occur before seeds germinate and stuff gets hot enough and things to do that. Also, again, it keeps back competition from other trees, and the understory, midstory helps remove that. And then, as we've seen in a lot of areas, the more fire you add to these areas, the more you open up that forest floor, you get more herbaceous growth and stuff going in there. So for livestock, also again benefits wildlife and a lot of different species and things like that.
And for a lot of producers, their land will look a lot like this, and especially in the southeastern part of the state. What are some safety precautions, or what's the difference in burning these type of areas as opposed to rangeland in the north?
So again, the techniques are very similar and stuff like that. There's going to be a little bit of differences in tweaking on some of the prescriptions and some of the conditions, because again, we don't want to get a lot of really hot fires that get up in the crown that do damage, especially if you're into timber production and things like that within that. So you want to keep this fire on the ground. So again, burning under conditions that are maybe a little higher humidities, but also you don't want to reduce heat scorch, so you're actually going to need a little more wind.
And how often should producers, think about burning their land?
Again, it's going to be up to their objectives of what they're wanting to do. But again, we've got, from work that we've done in southeast Oklahoma, we've got stuff that's showing we can burn annually. We can burn, about every 3 years is a really good optimal time frame in there, and that's probably, you look at historic account stuff too, going through that part of the world, 2 to 4 years was a pretty good fire return interval in there. So again, a lot of it depends upon their objectives and what they're wanting to do. If they're wanting to have more livestock enterprise in there, a little more fire frequency, Again, if they're wanting a little more timber and wildlife, they can stretch that out to 3-4 years and things like that. And also, again, once they get fire into that system, you can hit it several times with fire, and then you can slack off for a few more years than you can if you're just doing fire every once in a while.
All right, thanks, John. If you would like some more information about prescribed fire in forests, go to our website, sunup.okstate.edu.
Well, it's been a long time coming, but there are numbers in this cattle on feed report that we've been looking forward to.
Yeah, we're finally back on schedule with the USDA after the disruptions due to the shutdown. So the March cattle on feed report has February placements and marketings. Marketings were just a tick above last year and pretty much as expected. Placements came in bigger than expected, about 102% of last year. The market was actually expecting those numbers to be down 4 or 5%. So more cattle went into the feedlots in February. The March 1 cattle on feed inventory is just about 1% above a year ago. So a little bit of surprise in this market in terms of those bigger placements.
So having that many more placements, what does that mean for the feed market?
You know, I don't think this is creating a major problem. We have clearly changed the timing of feedlot cattle, you know, partly because of these bigger placements, but really just the cumulative effects of winter weather. You know, and now we've got flooding in lots of areas. That's disrupting some other things as well. But we've delayed some cattle this spring. Weights are lighter right now, so those cattle will be coming. We know we're going to have increased marketings as we move to the normal seasonal peaks in slaughter. For steers peak out usually in May or June. So we have some challenges ahead to keep moving these cattle through the system. I don't think there's an inevitable problem right now, but it is something we're going to want to watch in the coming weeks to make sure we move these cattle on through the system.
We're wrapping up March. We're moving into the second quarter of many markets. Let's talk about what's in store for the fed cattle markets.
Well, you know, fed cattle have basically followed a seasonal pattern. They've been grinding slowly higher through the first quarter. They normally peak about now, the beginning of the second quarter. They may go a little bit higher. Some people have actually been a little frustrated with all the weather disruptions we've had that we haven't seen more strength in these fed cattle markets, but they have moved seasonally higher. They may have a little ways to go yet because we're going to see some continued effects. Again, cattle are slow to market, weights are lighter, so we may have a little time to push this a little bit higher and a little bit longer than we would normally see.
Overall, how does the feeder cattle market look right now?
Feeder cattle markets, again, have mostly followed a seasonal pattern. For the lightweight end of the feeder cattle, the calves have moved seasonally higher through the first quarter. That's what they typically do. They also typically peak about now. I think they may have a little bit longer to go. You know, again, it's been a wet, sloppy winter. We've got lots of moisture, and so we've got lots of anticipation for good forage conditions. So I think we probably have some additional grass demand here for the next, you know, couple, 3 weeks that may give this thing a chance to push perhaps a little bit higher and extend this seasonal peak a little bit longer. Bigger feeder cattle, once you get over 700 pounds, actually move a little bit lower through the first quarter, and they have done that to a seasonal low. They'll begin now, and I think they already have sort of turned around, and they'll start grinding their way higher to a midsummer peak. So for the most part, markets have followed seasonal patterns pretty closely this spring.
Okay, thank you very much. Derrell Peel, Livestock Marketing Specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
As we approach April, it's certainly very close to the time when we need to think about the breeding program for any replacement heifers that we're going to breed this spring and have ready to calve next year. One of the cautions that I always like to remind producers at this time of the year is to make sure that these replacement heifers don't have a real drop-off in nutrition right before the start of the breeding season. And the way this could happen is if perhaps we've raised these heifers on some wheat pasture or some other really good growing program and perhaps have to move them to another location to get them close to the headquarters where we can gather them up and do synchronization and artificial insemination. In the process of that, if we allow these heifers to lose a lot of weight in a short period of time, it could really affect their ability to become bred during this breeding season. Research was done here at Oklahoma State a number of years ago looking at that very situation, where they had a set of heifers that were growing properly. They were fed a diet that was 120% of what they need for maintenance. And so this is a growing diet that these heifers were on. They tested the heifers using some blood samples and knew that all of them were cycling when they started this particular program. Then they took half of the heifers, and instead of giving them 120% of their maintenance diet, they cut that into 1/3 of that, or half those heifers only got 40% of what they needed in order to maintain weight. And they did this for just 2 weeks. Then they gave them one of the synchronization drugs and checked to see which of the heifers still were cycling and would ovulate and have a chance to breed. What they found, I thought, was rather startling, and that is, of the heifers that were fed to maintain that 120% of maintenance, in other words, to keep growing, all of those heifers responded to the drug and did ovulate. The heifers that were cut way back and only got 40% of what they needed, 70% of those heifers did not cycle, did not ovulate. Only 30% actually did. Tremendous difference in just 2 weeks' time. And that reminds me that as we're getting close to the breeding season with replacement heifers, those that are just now reaching puberty and start to cycle, we want to keep them growing, keep them nutritionally sound going into and through the breeding season in order to get a high percentage of them to cycle and to conceive, whether it be AI or natural breeding. Keep this in mind during this upcoming breeding season, and you'll have a higher percentage of those heifers bred when you check them next fall. Hey, we look forward to visiting with you again next week on SUNUP's Cow-Calf Corner.
Kim Anderson, our crop marketing specialist, is here now. Kim, wheat prices are still in the tank. Let's kind of start with an overview of what's happening.
Well, if you look at the cash price around Oklahoma, it's somewhere around $4.20, $4.30 a bushel. Forward contract for July delivery, probably $4.30, maybe $4.35, depending on the location, plus or minus 15 cents. I think the key is at this point in time, we thought that wheat prices would be significantly higher, $4.75, $5, and they're just not there. They're in the tank. Let's just get real about it.
Let's talk about exports and kind of why that export demand isn't increasing.
Well, what we was expecting was the Black Sea countries, Russia, Ukraine mainly, Kazakhstan to a limited degree, to run out of wheat this time of year for exporting, and they have. The reports are there's limited supply coming out of that area. But what we've got is the exports are coming from other countries. Egypt just came in for 3 different tenders, and listen to the countries that they're buying from. U.S. Pacific North, soft white expected, U.S. hard wheat expected, U.S. soft wheat expected, Russian milling wheat, that's hard red, Ukrainian, Australian, Canadian, French, German, Argentine, all expected, but Polish milling wheat, Kazakhstan milling wheat, Romanian milling wheat, Bulgarian milling wheat, Hungarian, and Paraguay's wheat. Who'd expect those countries to be exporting wheat, and in that they're exporting it, it's taking from our export demand.
So to add these countries into the conversation, let's look at why they're now players, and like a lot of things in our lives, technology is having an impact. Talk about that.
Well, you look at what we used to call the third world countries, and the former Soviet Union to a certain degree fit into that. They've got the latest technology in the production. They've improved their infrastructure for storage and delivery and loading on the vessels. They've got better varieties. They brought varieties in from the U.S., from Europe, from other locations. So they're taking this technology, they're increasing their production, they're increasing and maintaining the quality of their products, and they're moving that on the world market.
A big question, what does this mean for U.S. growers, and is there hope?
Well, yeah, there's hope. I think for the next few years, you're going to see exports increasing from these countries that are importing countries. They've increased their production. The weather looks good around the world. The more the importing countries produce, that's the less they have to import, that's the lower demand. However, consumption is increasing slightly faster than production. As the economies increase, they want higher quality foodstuffs, and that's good quality wheat. So I think as you're getting out 4 or 5 years, as consumption increases, then that demand is going to come back to the United States because we've always been the residual supplier of wheat and products.
Well, no doubt this conversation will continue, Kim. We appreciate your analysis as always. Thanks a lot.
If you own cattle, probably at some time or another, you're going to have to deal with a downer cow. Downer cows are very frustrating for producers and veterinarians alike. They can be difficult to diagnose. A lot of times treatment is unrewarding. You know, the producer's left with a cow that eats and drinks and looks perfectly healthy, but it just can't get up. So what causes these cows to go down? Well, we look at a lot of times at electrolyte imbalances, low calcium, which a lot of times is commonly referred to as milk fever, or low magnesium. Grass tetany is another name for that. Low phosphorus, low potassium, all can cause animals to go down and not be able to get up. You also can have severe infections that are usually associated with uterine infections or mastitis. You can have trauma, such as a fractured pelvis or a fractured femur. Calving difficulties usually can have obturator nerve or sciatic nerve damage, which causes paralysis in one or both of the hind limbs. If a producer finds a cow that's down, it's really important that if these cows are laid out flat, that we get them in sternal recumbency. Cows that are laying out flat are prone to bloat, and that can become fatal. I think producers need to keep in mind that even with the best of care, the damage that can occur to the muscles in the leg with all that pressure when they're laying down is sometimes irreversible. There was a study done in the 80s in which they just anesthetized healthy cows and then allowed those cows to recover. Half of those cows never were able to rise. So you can understand, in healthy cows that get down and can't get up, you can imagine that animals that succumb to some type of illness or condition, that some of these are never going to get up no matter what we do. If you'd like some more information about downer cows, just go to sunup.okstate.edu.
That'll do it for us this week. Remember, you can find us anytime at sunup.okstate.edu and also follow us on YouTube and social media. I'm Lyndall Stout. Have a great week, everyone, and remember, Oklahoma agriculture starts at sunup.